Hey students, welcome back to Buddy. And so today we're going to read chapter 20. We will review the notes for chapter 19. But chapter 20 is going to focus on the shelter that little T and his family are staying at, what life is like in the shelter, and what's happening in New Orleans. Do they get to go back to New Orleans to see what's going on? Who survived? Is Buddy alive? We will find out in chapter 20. The chapter 19, they started off at Aunt Joyce's house and then they were accepted into a shelter. Okay. Daddy had left to walk 10 miles. He thought he was just going to buy milk and medicine, but he returned with two men who take the entire family to a shelter. Mississippi is in ruins. They get accepted at a shelter. Little T sends more thinking messages to Buddy. And then they find out that New Orleans is flooded. The levees broke. Everything is underwater. Everything. I lay down on my cot. I curl up. I close my eyes. I go to a place where nobody else can go, not even Grandpa T. So little T is feeling great despair and sad, despondent, and without hope. Okay. We ain't got nowhere to live now, so we stay in that shelter. There must be about 1,000,000 other people living there with us, all in the same room. Half the people are from Mississippi. They're telling about a giant wave that washed everything away. Streets, houses, apartment buildings. I can't hardly believe it, but they're telling about it on TV, too. The other half of the people are from New Orleans. I lay there on my cot and I think about what if I see somebody I know? What if my teacher walks down the aisle? Or that boy Rusty? What if I see the lady who cuts Mama's hair? Or Mr. Nelson with the truck? Or Mrs. Washington? What if I see J-Boy walking by with his mama following behind him in her nightgown? I think about that and I look at all the faces, but I don't see nobody I know. All those faces, and not a single one of them is somebody I've ever seen before. Every day, different workers come in and talk to the people. They're trying to get us clothes and toothbrushes. They're trying to feed us and find us places to live. They're trying to match up families. People make signs and go walking up and down the aisles between the cots. The signs are just lists of names, all the people they can't find. One lady says the names are her children. She says she was visiting her mama in the hospital in Jackson when the storm came. The neighbor was watching her babies. She calls and calls, but the phones don't work. Now she don't know where any of them are. She's riding from shelter to shelter carrying her sign. Every day she walks the aisles someplace else. Can you imagine, students? Can you imagine not knowing where your sisters and brothers are, where your parents may be, aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, and you're in a shelter and you're looking? Okay, that's got to be hard. And little T thinks, I wonder if anybody is looking for us. I wonder if the news is telling about the storm all the way up in Chicago. Why does little T care about Chicago? Why does he care if the news has reached Chicago? Well, that's where his friend Jamila lives. I wonder if anybody tried to call us. I wonder what would happen if somebody wrote us a letter. Where would it go? The shelter is getting fuller and fuller. We squeeze the cots closer together. They make rules about who uses the bathroom when. You should have gone with Joyce. Daddy tells Grandpa T. I'll bet she would come back and get you if we called her. What am I going to do sleeping on the sofa in her daughter's apartment in Atlanta? Grandpa T says. Daddy shrugs up his shoulders, and Grandpa T lays back down on his cot. He closes his eyes and goes to sleep, or wherever. Because, to tell the truth, can't nobody really sleep in that shelter with all those people always moving and talking all day long? They're talking loud all night long. They're whispering. They're tossing and turning. They're going to the bathroom. The babies are crying. And when it's just barely light, the loud talking starts up again. Move over. Where are you from? How much water did you get? And one thing everybody's talking about is what it looks like in New Orleans. You can't get away from it. They're saying how the only thing you can see is the roofs of the houses. For miles and miles, there ain't nothing but black water and roofs. How the helicopters come and take the people off their roofs. How they've got boats everywhere pulling people out of the water. How they've got bodies floating around and tangled up in the trees and putrefying in the houses where they were trapped when the water rushed up. Now that's gruesome, okay? But that's the truth. People had to escape to the top of the roofs of their homes. They would wait for the helicopters to pick them up. The water is black. You really can't walk through it. It's polluted with waste material and trash and toilet water running over. It's not a good scene in New Orleans. They've got the TV going all the time. They're showing pictures of the buildings burning right in the middle of the water. Can't nobody get close enough to help, and the buildings just keep on burning. I'm watching that news and I'm thinking, that can't be real. That can't be my home. That's got to be a movie. And then I see I'm sitting on a cot in a shelter in Mississippi. One day, they show a dog swimming through the water. He's black and his tail is sticking out straight behind him. I jump up off my cot and run over to take a look. He's making a V-shaped ripple through the water and he's barely able to keep his head up. The rescuers are standing in a boat and wearing yellow vests with orange belts. They're saying, "Come on, boy, you can do it." And they're reaching out to him and grabbing him and dragging him up into that boat. That dog shakes water all over the place. The rescuers hold their hands up to protect their faces, and you can see they're smiling. And I've got my face right up to that TV. But when the rescuers step back and the dog stands still, I can see he ain't got no caterpillar eyebrow. His throat ain't white underneath. He's got all four of his legs. I lay back down on my cot. What am I doing thinking that dog might be Buddy? Even if he got out, even if he struggled through the window, even if he heard me calling and calling him in my sleep, how he's going to swim with only 3 legs? What's a dog like Buddy going to do in a world filled up with water? One shelter lady gives me a Game Boy. Okay, so students, when there's a natural disaster and people stay in a shelter, people donate toothbrushes and food and supplies and water and charities like the Salvation Army and the American Red Cross. They donate games and puzzles and books. So little T actually got a Game Boy, like a new Game Boy to play. Okay. I mean, it's nice, but really he wants Buddy. One shelter lady gives me a Game Boy. I sit on my cot and play it every day. I don't do nothing else. I don't talk. I don't eat except when I have to. Mama keeps saying, "Are you okay, son?" And I don't answer. Baby Terrell starts walking in that shelter and Mama has to chase after him. Tanya makes friends with two girls with cots near hers. They fix each other's hair. Tanya looks pretty stupid afterward, but she's happy. A lady 2 cots over starts having a baby. They whisk her off while her fiancé is in the bathroom, and he don't have any idea where they took her. He sits there crying until somebody comes and leads him away by the hand. One old man stands up on the far end of the room and starts trying to take off all his clothes. His wife is screaming at him, and he's saying he's itching all over. Grandpa T sits up and watches that show a while. When the lady finally makes the man stop, Grandpa T lays back down and closes his eyes. I go to the next level. That's in the Game Boy game. We've been in that shelter almost a week when Daddy comes up to Grandpa T and says, "Wake up, I've got something to tell you." Grandpa T opens his eyes. "I ain't asleep," he says. "They told me it ain't all flooded," Daddy says. "They told me around our street there are places where the water ain't so deep. Some places." Grandpa T raises up on his elbows. "One man here told me he's driving down tomorrow morning just to look," Daddy says. "He wants to see how much water he got in his house." Grandpa T shakes his head. "Too much," he says. Daddy don't listen to him. He can't stay, of course. There ain't nowhere to stay. Daddy crosses his arms over his chest and looks at Mama sitting on the cot behind me. "He asked me to ride with him," Daddy says, "and I'm going." Grandpa T sits up. I put down the Game Boy. "I want to know if you want to come," Daddy says to Grandpa T. "There's room," meaning there's room in the car, as I go to New Orleans to check it out. Grandpa T shakes his head. "You go first," he says. "I ain't ready." Then he lays back down and closes his eyes. It seems that Grandpa T is just tired. He's old. He's not doing well. He's been through so many hurricanes and storms. He's lost his home. And he's just not ready to go and check out the damage. He's tired. I open my mouth, and out come the first words I've said in almost a week. "Can I come?" I say it real quick, and then I shut up. Daddy looks hard at me. Mama stands up behind me. "It ain't going to be easy," Daddy says. "We won't get back here until late." "I can do it," I say, and push the Game Boy off to one side. Daddy looks up at Mama. I know she's shaking her head. I know her mouth's making the shape of no. Daddy looks down at me again. "You're old enough," he says. "You can come." We get in the man's truck before light. I'm sitting between him and Daddy. They're drinking coffee. We're riding with the windows open. The cool of the morning is coming in with the smell of all the pine trees. We're going along looking at the white, broke trunks pointing up to the sky. Behind us, the sun starts to come up. We have to go around the lake to get into town. That storm washed the bridge to pieces. The concrete slabs of that superhighway bridge just floated off like toy boats. Daddy says they've got real boats stacked up in the marshes like dead fish. He says they've got boats sitting on top of bridges down by Empire. He says they've got barges sitting on top of houses in the lower 9th Ward. That's a lot of water, I'm thinking. That's enough water to fill up a city. That's enough water to fill up a house. We're taking the back roads. The man tells us they got the army blocking the main ways. They got piles of dirt and gravel dumped across the road so nobody can get through. They got soldiers standing there with guns, and they won't let you pass. He tells us they got people tearing up the city. They're breaking down the windows and stealing everything they can lay their hands on. He says the mayor don't want nobody coming into town. They're afraid people from the country going to come and join up with the thugs. They're afraid it's going to get out of hand. Daddy says it's already out of hand. That's so, says the man. That's truly so. When we get into the city, the man stays close to the river, where the land is higher and there ain't no flooding. But everywhere we look, trees are broke or fallen down. It's just like Mississippi, except these are oak trees. On some of them, the root balls are sticking up almost as high as a house. The trees pulled up sidewalks and fences and even houses when they fell over. All the yards are full up with broke limbs and trash. They got pieces of fence and strips of tin roof laying on the street. They got patio chairs sitting in the branches of the trees that are still standing up. They got a mattress twisted up and some wires hanging off a pole. So when we meet for Zoom, I'll show you some images and pictures of this mess that Hurricane Katrina caused in New Orleans. We're driving over electricity lines and phone lines draping all over the streets. We're crunching branches and trash. Everywhere you turn, there are great big old potholes that could swallow your car. Daddy says to the man driving, "Watch out!" And the man swerves that truck one way, then another. And this ain't even where the water is. This ain't even the part we've been seeing on TV. It takes us almost an hour just to get to our neighborhood. The man lets us down near our church. That church is standing there all high and dry. It ain't flooded at all, and the grass needs cutting. The front door is wide open. Daddy walks up the steps. Inside, it's cooler. He shouts out, "Hello!" A man stands up behind the altar. It's Brother James. "Praise God," Brother James says. "It's you." He and Daddy are standing there hugging like they're real brothers. Then Brother James turns and hugs me. He's sweaty, like he ain't bathed in days. "Your family?" he says to Daddy. "Safe," Daddy says. "We went to my cousin's place in Mississippi. After the storm, she went on up to her daughter's place in Atlanta. Now we're in a shelter." "Praise God," Brother James says again. Daddy sort of waves his hand around at the chair standing in the church. "Everybody," he says. "Mrs. Washington passed," Brother James says. "She drowned in her attic." So Mrs. Washington passed away. She went all the way up to her attic, but she couldn't make it. She couldn't get out and she couldn't get rescued. Daddy covers his eyes with his hand. "Brother Thomas is in the hospital in Houston. His heart went bad on him. And those Carey boys have been pulling people out. They got their fishing boat and they've been going back and forth." He stops for a minute and looks out the window. "But they've left now. They're worn out." Daddy finishes rubbing his eyes and nods. "We're going to the house," he says. Brother James must think he's a little crazy, right? "You can't get there," Brother James says. Daddy looks at him. "Your street's flooded up to the eaves, 12 feet of water at least. I'm sorry, T. Jr. You're going to have to tell your daddy," who's Grandpa T, "about his house. Y'all ain't got nothing left. It's all gone. Everything." "But what about Buddy?" I say. "Buddy?" Brother James says. "We left him locked in the bathroom. The car was too little for him to fit. He's been waiting and waiting. Brother James looks at Daddy. You were planning on getting that dog? Daddy nods. You can't get there, son, Brother James says. Your house is standing in the middle of a lake. But I can swim. I know how. You can't swim in that black water. You don't even know what's in there. And what's your family going to do if you drown yourself going after that dog? Buddy was a street dog when you found him. Now he's got to take care of his own self again. But he's only got 3 legs now. Brother James stoops down and looks me in the eye. You can't get to that dog, little T. It's the Lord's will, he says, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Oh boy. Do you think this is going to stop little T? Do you know how little T always makes a plan? If people tell little T he can't do something or things are hopeless, well, little T is feeling hopeless, and I have a feeling he'll try to make another plan, but it really doesn't look good for the house or for Buddy. Okay? So I know you're going to look forward to chapter 21 because you're going to want to find out what happens next. So let's look at chapter 20 notes. Okay, it starts off in the shelter, and then they take a trip to New Orleans. Little T describes daily life in the shelter. People are looking for lost family members and friends. Workers are assisting people with clothes, toothbrushes, and food. And there are bathroom rules, and it's noisy. Disturbing information about the destruction in New Orleans is played on the TV. Little T sends messages to Buddy. Little T gets a new Game Boy. Little T goes with Daddy to New Orleans. Mrs. Washington died. She passed away. She drowned in the attic. And little T and his daddy were told that they cannot return to their home. So, with all this said, this is your job in the Stop and Jot question. I want you to write a note of encouragement to little T. Say some things to little T that will help him get through this tough time. I want you to encourage him. Maybe give him an idea, tell him to hang in there, remind him of good things. But I need you to encourage him. Think about it, write a couple of sentences, and encourage little T. And that's it. And I will see you during our Zoom session and also back when we start chapter 21.